I'm Welton Gaddy, host of State of Belief Radio, with our continuing coverage of the 2016 Republican National Convention in Cleveland, Ohio. It's Monday, July 18th, and I'm joined by Greg Lebel, a veteran of national electoral politics and an invaluable resource for our coverage. Greg, before we get to day one of the GOP convention, I just want to ask you what some of your thoughts are about the selection of Indiana Governor Mike Pence as Donald Trump's running mate.
Well, in one word, safe. I think everyone pretty much agrees that this was the safe choice. This guy is a guy who has a fairly good reputation with a lot of the components of the Republican base that Trump has had some rocky relationships with. He's a physical conservative. He's been with one sort of hiccup around his religious freedom, so-called Religious Freedom Act in Indiana. He's had a very good relationship with the Christian right. So there's I think that's he said it, or Trump said it himself rather oddly at the announcement. He said, this is about party unity. And I think that's exactly right. And you look at some of the other candidates, and they didn't do what I guess what Pence does for the ticket.
Mm-hmm. Greg, what happened this afternoon around 4:15 Eastern Time? There was all this shouting and chanting, and how did you interpret what was going on?
It's something we don't see at conventions anymore. It's very refreshing in a way, I guess, to see this kind of thing. I think two things. I think this was clearly an attempt, or let's say, a manifestation of frustration with Donald Trump, and it came from two places. Initially, it was coming from those folks who really have that anyone but Trump or never Trump component of the Republican Party, who just don't like him, don't see him as a Republican, have issues with him, and have all along. And I think magnified by some of the supporters of some of the other candidates whom he vanquished along the way. But I think what was augmenting that, which was interesting, is people who were really angry coming out of the platform committee hearings. And this is the religious right. This is the Ken Cuccinelli crowd who were angry that some of the stuff that they wanted to see in the platform were not there. So you have sort of two splits within the party who were not happy, found themselves aligned with each other in this effort, and ultimately failed because the leadership of the party was simply not going to let this happen.
Would you say this was an effective first day of a national political convention, or was it a very odd first day, or did it set the tone we're going to get the rest of the week?
Well, as Lucy Ricardo famously said many years ago, when one of her friends came in with a rather odd hat, she said, "If that's the hat you want, you got a good one." And I'd say that's what I would say about this first day. It was a first day that seemed to be about anger and frustration and loss. And that's a strange word to use, but the more I watched, the more I this word kept coming to mind about people losing sons and daughters in war, and people losing jobs, and people sort of losing that sense of their centrality in the American culture. But just real visceral stuff. No humor whatsoever, and these aren't supposed to be laugh riots, but there's usually some lightheartedness about these things. But there was none of that. This was really a raw first day. And as I said, if that's what they wanted, that's what they got. But it seems like an odd way to start, and it seems like an odd way to lead up to the candidate's wife's speech. So yeah, as I said, it's probably not how I would have done it, but that may be exactly what they were looking for.
Well, Greg, I've got to ask you, and I've got to confess my own feelings as I ask you this, and I might as well just say aloud. I mean, we heard twice murder charges against Ms. Clinton. We heard the agonizing testimony of the woman who lost her son in Benghazi. Yep. I had the distinct impression myself that that went overboard. That was almost a manipulation of a serious grief. Am I being too harsh in saying this?
No, no, not at all. That was the tenor of this first day. Is that anger, that visceral sort of reaction to all things Clinton, and secondarily to all things Obama. No, this is not this. This message was one of just anger and otherness. There's us and there's them. And Donald Trump is the guy who's going to take care of you against them. I found the same. My reaction was the same way from the sheriff who got into the Law and Order piece, who talked about Blue Lives Matter. And every time that anyone talked about the events of the last few weeks, and this is, these were terrible tragedies, the shootings in Dallas and in Baton Rouge, but nobody mentioned any of the other shootings. Nobody mentioned the violence of police on African Americans, with the exception of Rudy Giuliani, who got no response when he did.
Right. Greg, what are you looking forward to, or what are you dreading in the next 3 days of the GOP convention?
What I'm looking forward to is to see sort of where they go with this theme. It was this setting that sort of very negative tone about, when you've got a guy who's so unpopular, I guess one could argue that the first thing you've got to do is say, yeah, we know you don't like me, but she's the devil incarnate, which seems sort of to have been the message tonight. Do they then turn a corner now after this tomorrow and begin to really sort of make the case for Donald Trump? Even his wife didn't really make the case for him in the way a wife normally does. She had the opportunity, much like Libby Dole did back in 1996. When talking about Bob Dole when he was the nominee, or Mrs. Romney did in 2012, talking about her husband and his ministry and so on and so. There was none of that. So when are they going to do this? I mean, there were speakers who didn't even mention Donald Trump.
Right. Well, you're going to be with us through the whole week, and we'll just see what happens. George Washington University Assistant Professor of Political Management, Greg Lebel. Thanks for being with us. I'm Welton Gaddy for State of Belief Radio.